President Clinton used to say that when I was a roving diplomat, that whenever there was a problem with a rogue state, send Richardson because bad guys like him. And so I guess having looked at the format of the conference, do you engage rogue states? Do you isolate them? Do you strike them? I'm on the side of engagement. Doesn't always work, but I believe when you look at the countries that I've dealt with, and these are the countries that I know the best. North Korea, I've been there 6 times, negotiated release of American prisoners, servicemen, nuclear issue, MIAs. Cuba, political prisoners there during the Castro regime, Fidel. Sudan, was just there 6 months ago, got an American journalist out, negotiated a ceasefire that lasted about a day. I know Iraq was my first major initiative, where as a congressman, and I wasn't an official member of the government, I went to Iraq. 2 American servicemen, 2 American contractors had been captured. And for 6 months I negotiated going to see Saddam Hussein, and basically the ambassador in New York, who I was negotiating with, the Iraqi ambassador, said, it's all personal. It's how you connect with Saddam Hussein, whether you get this prisoner out, whether you get the 2 prisoners out. All these policies, our 2 countries are in terrible, terrible relationship. There's sanctions, we may go to war, so it's a personal connection. I remember going and traveling to Iraq incognito. The Clinton administration basically said, you're not a member of the administration, but if you succeed in getting the 2 out, we want some credit. If you don't succeed, nice meeting you. And I understood that. Many of my missions I've done that way. I remember sitting with Saddam Hussein face to face at the beginning of the meeting. First of all, one of the characteristics of rogue regimes is when you meet with them, they try to psychologically get the best of you. They meet with you not at morning or afternoon. They meet with you in the dead of night, 3 a.m. Fidel Castro used to do that. In fact, he had his best dinners about 4 a.m. The same with the Iraqis. I remember arriving dead tired into Baghdad, a knock on my door about 3 a.m. President wants to see you. I said, well, yeah, I'll be when in the morning? No, right now. And I went in, and the first thing I did in the meeting was commit a horrendous error, a cultural error. I crossed my legs and showed him the sole of my shoe, which to an Arab is a supreme insult. I was dead tired. In my briefing books, it said, do not cross your legs, but I did it. And so Saddam Hussein kept looking at me while I did this, and I was giving my spiel, humanitarian reasons. Please let these 2 Americans out. And he kept looking at me, and his beady eyes really focused on me like a laser. And then all of a sudden, he walked out of the room. And I remember asking my interpreter, is he coming back? And he said, yes, he's coming back, but you must apologize because you've committed a grave error, a cultural error. Saddam Hussein came back, and I made a snap decision. General Clark, who knows rogues very well. In fact, one of the rogues told me he liked General Clark, Milosevic. But, you know, he won, Wes Clark won that war. So, and I remember Saddam Hussein coming back and expecting me to apologize, grovel. Because psychologically, I'd put myself in a situation where I had to somehow take a step to bring him back into the conversation. And I decided not to apologize. I went on, very respectful. And I think that gave me respect in his eyes. He saw me, I kept talking, very stern, never smiled, didn't understand English. We had a translator. And then all of a sudden, he didn't look at me, and he said, by the order vested in me in Article 17 of the Iraqi Constitution, I hereby turn over the 2 Americans to you. And I was startled, and a human gesture, I grabbed his hand. And all of the Iraqi security forces around the room jumped on us because they thought I was going to commit an act of assassination, which I wasn't. I was just grateful. A human gesture. And then he stood up and he called the press in. And he said to me for the first time with a little smile, you know, my appearing with you with my press does not enhance my political standing here. And I said, well, Mr. President, I don't think it helps me either. Diplomacy is personal. Diplomacy is not just talking to people, it's carrot and sticks. You know, dealing with rogue states is not always going to work, but I believe that what you need is an effort of engagement where you have a plan. I would meet with rogue nations. I think right now we're talking about Cuba, we're talking about Iran, we're talking about North Korea. We kind of have engaged them finally, and it succeeded. Sudan, we've engaged them, I think, in the wrong way. That it makes sense to engage, but you need carrot and sticks. I'll finish with Cuba, and then because I know that the best questions will come from you, and I can just ramble forever, which I don't want to do. Is 12 years ago I went to Cuba, and my objective was to negotiate an immigration agreement. This was as a congressman, unofficially, Clinton administration, and to get some political prisoners out. The objective with the immigration agreement was to try to have more Cuban families come to Miami and vice versa. The quota was at the time restricted, and my objective was to expand the quota of people that could move back and forth. But also, as any politician, you wanted to come back with something. And there were a number of dissidents that had been jailed, journalists, you know this. And I had a list of 15 that I'd gotten from Human Rights Watch and a Cuban organization that I would try to bring back. And I remember having meetings with President Castro. And again, meetings at 3 a.m. I mean, the man worked all night and slept partly in the morning, superbly informed. And I remember Castro being somebody that had read every newspaper and watched cable television. By 11 a.m. he was superbly informed, and he had all these stacks of papers in front of him. First-rate intellect, but also somebody that obviously was set in his ways, in his very authoritarian ways. And I tried everything. I negotiated the immigration agreement, but I was trying to get some political prisoners out. And I tried everything. I said, you have to do it. You have to do it. And then I remember speaking to him in Spanish and doing two things. One, saying, you know, Mr. President, in Spanish, I was just at a Cuban baseball game. And I noticed that the score was 13-11. Great hitting. But in Cuba, you have no pitching. What's wrong with your pitching? He got pissed off. And he said, no. We have good pitching. You just went to the wrong game. And a connection was kind of established, although it irritated him. And then I said to him, well, you know, and I said, here's my Hail Mary. I said, you know, Mr. President, Jesse Jackson was just here. And you gave him 18 prisoners. And you're giving your Hispanic brother nothing. He looked at me and he started laughing and laughing and laughing and cavorting and laughing. He said, okay, you get 3. That's how I did it. All I'm saying here, and you know, I can go on with many stories like this, is that diplomacy is personal. Personal relationships are critical. George Bush I was probably a president that had the vastest network of personal relationships with world leaders. Now, you know, I'll conclude with rogue stakes. Again, you can't just meet without a plan. I would meet with almost any rogue leader, Al-Qaeda exception, obviously, bin Laden, many others, terrorists. But I think that extends to Syria, to Iran, to North Korea, to Cuba, to Sudan in a different way, to Venezuela. But have a plan. Where do you want to end up? All of these rogue nations, in my experience, want some kind of approval from the United States, some kind of press statement. Secondly, I always felt that going to them was not a concession. You know, I'll go to North Korea, I'll go to Cuba, go to Sudan. They think it's a concession, but it really isn't. And I felt that that was something that, in return for going to their nation, that you get something in return. As I said before, they all have a common strategy. They try to psychologically get the best of you. Meet at 3 a.m. You arrive, they show no schedule. That's the North Koreans, the Cubans, the Sudanese. There's nothing programmed. They want you alone at the meeting. They don't want any other officials there. They test you when you're most tired. Beware if you deal with a rogue country. They try to show you hospitality that later may put you in difficult predicaments. Everything where you are, your room, you're being photographed, so you have to be enormously careful. They care deeply about public opinion. They care what you're going to say after the meeting. But interestingly, whether it's North Korea, Sudan, whether it's Cuba, they all want one thing: a visit from the President of the United States in some way. You know, many people hate us around the world. But at the same time, we are America. And if we regain that position we had in the world where we stand for human rights, where we stand for democracy, where we rejoin the International Criminal Court, the Geneva Conventions, we shut down Guantanamo, we bring back habeas corpus, we say that we're not going to tolerate torture, we're not going to eavesdrop on our own citizens. I'm getting in my campaign mode, so I'll stop. Then we can deal with anyone. Thank you very much.